We are now officially moving into school building implementation of ISF. And I'm happy to hear the comments that were just made about really boosting your Tier 1 implementation, right? Because truth be told, we've been doing this for 20 years, right? We've been doing PBIS for a really long time. And we've been connecting mental health to this work for the last 8 years. I think in the last 3 or 4 years, we've developed more of the model than we have in the past 20. So the speed of acceleration and the growth and the depth and quality of the Tier 1 training we now provide new teams is far and away different than when we first started this. So I think that some of the examples that we're going to be sharing today, I'm going to also apologize because I did add a couple more slides, but I promise that we will send all of the updated slides to you so that you have them. But based on the dialogue and conversation, I put a lot more content because I really feel like this room can handle it, and I think they're really critical moves in terms of boosting the level of implementation you currently are in with Tier 1 and Tier 2. So I'm going to feel like the taskmaster again. We will give you time to action plan, but let me chunk the material today so that we're not doing one item at a time, but we'll chunk it so that we can get through all of the content today. We're hoping to get through Tier 1 and Tier 2 and touch a little bit on Tier 3, but I really want to kind of have us walk away with a very clear picture about what you should be seeing at Tier 1 and Tier 2. It's important for the district and the state to know what the look-fors are and what this looks like and sounds like so that we can wrap around the type of supports that are really required to move this thing forward, because it is going to require a different way of work across all of those processes. So is it fair, given the time allocation we've got right now, is it fair to keep the same roles that we had from yesterday? Is everybody comfortable with that, or should we revisit this? We're good. Okay, check. The other thing I want to quickly make sure that you are following along with is we are going to use this handout, the Action Planning Companion Guide, as your assessment tool right now, just to do, when we do have time for teams, you can quickly assess where you are and identify some quick action steps in your dialogue that will fill and complete your action plan. So we are going to build this talk, and we've built the slides from the Action Planning Companion Guide. This guide is an enhancement to the TFI, the Tiered Fidelity Inventory. How many of you are familiar with TFI? Gosh, that makes my heart sing. I actually call her the Tiffany because we spent so much time with creating this tool, and we told ourselves we didn't want to add another acronym, so I named her Tiffany. So just too much information. Okay. So the purpose of the TFI, as if you recall, is to assess the extent to which we are implementing Tiers 1, 2, and 3 with fidelity, right? The magic of this document is that we pulled many documents together, and now we have one go-to document that really sets in motion the systems features required for social, emotional, behavioral, and academic support, right? We'll see words that say academic and behavior because we're really trying to harness a common way of work across multiple domains, and I think this instrument really does the trick. So I'm very excited about it. When we do our training now, we do this training. I can't go backwards. I can no longer talk about PBIS without talking about social emotional competencies and mental health. So you're going to see that reflected out in this training. So when we do our training, our brand new team training, this is our professional roadmap. And so what we'll do today is we're going to chunk out team time to talk about the specific team at Tier 1. We're going to talk about implementation and enhancing current level of implementation. I'm going to give you time to really talk about what you're going to do on the ground when you go back. And then we'll talk about evaluation. So that's how I'm going to chunk the time that you guys have to talk about it. Sound okay? So again, the purpose is action planning. We are in the midst of enhancing TFI, as you always are. Nothing is stagnant, everything is fluid. So at this point in time, it's much more of an action planning document in front of you. So let's start with Tier 1 and talk about some of the enhancements. So you saw this yesterday, right? So we know that the team composition in our current PBIS effort consists of representation from our school community that includes coaching expertise, behavior expertise, knowledge about the school, academic and behavior patterns, knowledge about the operations of the school. We need our students to be representative, right? We know the big idea to have a solid Tier 1 team is that we are effective when we've got the voice and ownership and partnership together that represents our community. We are now holding ourselves accountable to make sure that we absolutely have the youth voice, the family voice, and our community partners sitting on our teams, looking and reviewing the data and making decisions together about what initiatives, practices, protocols we are going to put in place, so that we're demystifying both mental health and education, because we're harnessing all of that knowledge together, and through an MOU process, we are establishing very clear roles and functions. So let me give you a couple of examples here. Okay, along with that, again, symmetry and process. Yesterday we talked a lot about the district operating procedures. We're going to hold the teams at the building level equally accountable for having operating procedures. We're going to use the TIPS form. The states that we are working with, or that I was working with in the Mid-Atlantic region for the past 10 or 20 years, use the TIPS form at the state level, the district level, and the school building level across all tiers of implementation, right? We modify it based on each of those teaming processes, but we know when we walk into a meeting in Virginia, I can walk into the state management meeting, they're using the TIPS process. I can walk into any of the districts that we're working with under Project Aware or School Climate Transformation, and they're using a district level TIPS model, and I can walk into the building. So we're going to hold steady in that symmetry of process, that we're going to have those operating procedures, and again, it's a fluid process. So one of those things that informs a common way of work and the MTSS kind of building in our academic behavior and social emotional lens comes from some of the policy statements that are getting written in the legislative processes in a lot of our states. And I want to share this example because this really sets the tone for investing in a different way of work. So I share with you the Vermont example. And we've been talking about this notion of equal priority, right? We're never going to get the academic outcomes unless we're paying attention to the whole child. We're never going to get the academic outcomes unless we're paying attention to staff wellness. So I love the language in this document, and this policy informs implementation in Vermont. So look at the lines in red here, and we'll read them together. The General Assembly in this state has the commitment that mental, physical, and nutritional health of our students and their caregivers is addressed with the same level of attention and concern as is our students' academic and cognitive achievement. Look at the bottom, that the General Assembly declares Vermont to be a state in which equity, caring, safety, both emotional and physical, are evident in all of our schools' practices. So when I'm a building level principal, I can say to staff, we are going to embed social emotional competencies into every aspect of what we do because it needs to be evident in all of our schools' practices, every minute of the day, right? And we're going to show you how to make this happen in your schools. So I love that the policy statements are there and evident. So here's my utopian, right? We're going to go through my utopian school with all the examples, and I'll throw it all out there and let you consume it. In my utopian world, School employed and community employed staff use community and school data to assess the needs of young people in their school community, and together as an integrated team, select evidence-based practices that match specific needs, right? We've been talking a lot about that yesterday and this morning so far. What if we could make that happen in every single school? It will require that we're looking at school level data, and we will be screening kids with internalizing needs. And you have already mentioned how excited you are about changing the terminology of your office referral form to make sure we're paying close attention to those kids that are visiting the nurse, that are maybe hanging out in the hallway waiting to see their favorite adult because they need some sort of positive contact and maybe a moment in time before they can go to class and face their class. So as we're screening from this view and this lens, I want your teams to not only serve as surveillance teams, but I want you to look at your data with a social service lens. The data is telling us that our kids need something different from us. And so to the extent that we can look at office referral patterns, we can look at attendance rates, we can look at academics, they're saying to us, we need you adults to do something differently. And I think if we can use a social service lens and say, what is it that they need? Rather than, what do we do to exclude them? Because too often we go to that, there's something wrong with a kid, and we've got to really kind of set in motion a different dynamic as we're looking at the data. So have that social service lens. And when we add our community partners to the table, they're going to give us information that we, again, have been talking about at the district level, but it's going to be really important that the data is personalized and customized to the school building, right? Not everybody's going to need trauma-informed care to the extent, right, that you know, that's the new buzzword. Not everybody's going to need restorative practices. So we've got to be able to customize and personalize based on the unique needs of the community and the kids and the staff that we serve. We've got to drill down to say, what is it that our school needs? And how do we inform our district about how to support those new initiatives or practices that we need, because our kids very much need it. Okay, so this is an example when a community agency came to one of our schools and school systems, and they came to us with this data. And I don't know if you guys have access to this data. It is a free system. But this is, so here's the map of one of the counties that we're working with on the East Coast. And the red buildings are high schools. And the blue dots are alcohol outlets. Attendance and truancy has been a major, right? Yeah, for the teachers. So attendance and truancy has been an issue and concern for this county for a very long time. And they've done everything they could think of. It was only when the community partners came to the table and we started to dissect the community data that might be influencing and impacting attendance and truancy that we're really able to look from a systems lens how we need to rearrange the systems to support opportunities for kids to come to school, right? So here's what we did. We brought the transportation folks in, and we took a study on kids' bus routes and kids' walking routes to the bus stops. And one of the things we found is that many of our communities had so many liquor and alcohol outlets around them that literally if I walked out my front door and went to the right and I passed an alcohol outlet that was open 24/7, there's a social dynamic that takes place around alcohol outlets. I was less likely to get on my bus to go to school because I'm going to stop and socialize. If I have a different route and I go left away from that liquor outlet, I'm much more likely to get to the bus and get on the bus and go to school. So they took a very systems lens to this, but it was only when the community, again, brought this to the table in the type of data that they were looking at. So we suffer through the data time and time again. It's like Groundhog Day, right? It's like, okay, we have an attendance problem. Okay, we have a truancy problem. And we've done everything we can think of under the sun to make our environments more welcoming, inclusive. And it turns out it was a larger issue for this particular community. Now, that's not going to be the same for your community, but I love this as an example of bringing the right partners and expanding your team. The other thing that they had an opportunity to look at too through this data system was hospitals. They had very few mental health resources, but they had hospitals. And guess what? Hospitals are really interested in prevention. And they're willing to put a lot of money towards prevention because they know that the sooner we provide competencies, social emotional competencies to kids, the less likely we are to consume it on the adult side when we have ulcers and migraines and all kinds of physical health issues due to our mental health problems. So they're really looking at that. So this was very insightful, and it let our schools get partnerships with hospital settings, which was a unique partnership. So it just opens up possibilities of resources that you never thought were there. Okay, so with that, I'm going to let you talk through, at the building level this time, who do we need to include? What should the operating procedures be? And what are some of the data that would really influence and give us a wider view of what's going on in our specific school-based communities, okay? So yesterday we did kind of the district, and now we're going into buildings. So a slightly different conversation, but I think very much important part of the dialogue